I never imagined that the moment that would change my life forever would happen inside a crowded coffee shop, under bright lights, with strangers watching and judging in silence. But that's exactly where it happened. The air smelled like roasted beans and sugar syrup. People were laughing, typing on laptops, living their normal lives, while mine was quietly falling apart. I was on one knee. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just quietly, holding a small velvet box in my hands. Inside it was a ring I had spent months designing. I chose the stone myself. I studied cuts, colors, clarity, not because I cared about diamonds, but because I cared about what it symbolized. Permanence. Commitment. A future. I looked up at her. Diana. She stood there with her arms crossed, her weight shifted to one leg, her expression tired, almost annoyed. She didn't smile. She didn't gasp. She didn't even look surprised. She looked inconvenienced. Nathan, she sighed, rubbing her temple. This again. That was it. Not a yes. Not a no. Not even a question. Just, this again. She didn't look at the ring. Didn't reach for my hand. Didn't soften her voice. She turned around and started walking away. And just like that, it was over. Not with a scene. Not with shouting. Not with tears. Just a quiet exit. People noticed. A couple at the next table stopped talking. A girl near the window whispered something to her friend. An older woman looked at me with pity in her eyes. I slowly stood up, my face burning, my heart heavy, the velvet box still open in my hands like proof of my own foolish hope. This was the 7th time. 7. 7 times I had believed maybe this would be the moment. The first time, she had laughed nervously and said we were too young. The second time, she told me her career had to come first. The third time, she said she was emotionally exhausted. The fourth time, she said she needed more time. The fifth time, she said she wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. The sixth time, she asked if I could just wait a little longer. And the 7th time, she didn't even bother explaining. She just walked away. I closed the ring box. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. From Marcus. Strike 7? Man, you never learn. She's way out of your league. I stared at the screen. And something finally clicked. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But slowly, painfully, clearly. Every time she rejected me, something strange happened afterward. She suddenly had a new project. With Marcus. She suddenly stayed late. With Marcus. She suddenly had meetings that weren't on the calendar. With Marcus. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Then I thought I was being insecure. Then I thought I was overthinking. But now I saw the pattern. And once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't ask questions. I simply deleted his number. Then I went into my contacts and blocked her. Then I opened my social apps and removed her from every platform. Then I left every shared group chat, project channel, and message thread. In less than 10 minutes, 7 years of emotional attachment disappeared from my digital life. When I got home, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Still. Heavy. But also, lighter. I looked around and saw pieces of her everywhere. A sweater hanging behind the door. Her makeup bag on the bathroom counter. A book she left on my shelf. The folder with our joint savings, the one labeled house fund. The house we were supposed to buy. The future we were supposed to build. I took a box from the closet. And I started packing. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Calmly. Carefully. Like someone packing memories into cardboard. I folded her clothes. Wrapped her fragile items. Placed the book on top. Slid the savings folder inside. Closed the box. And addressed it to her. When I was done, the apartment felt empty. But I didn't feel empty. I felt calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I went to bed early that night. And I slept deeply. No racing thoughts. No anxious dreams. No replaying conversations. Just sleep. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I took a different route to work. I used a side entrance. I didn't walk past her desk. I didn't look for her face. I just sat down and opened my laptop. A notification popped up. From her. I need to explain about yesterday. Delete. Another one. Why did you block me? Delete. Another. Can we talk? Delete. At lunch, my coworker leaned over. Did you and Diana fight? I looked up calmly. No. Well, did you break up? We were never together, I said. He looked confused. But you guys were always. I stopped chasing, I said gently. That's all. He didn't know what to say. At 3 in the afternoon, I felt someone standing in front of me. I didn't look up. Nathan, she said. I kept typing. Why are you ignoring me? I'm not, I replied calmly. I'm working. You sent my things back. Yes. Why? Because they're yours. Her voice softened. Are you angry? I paused. Then I finally looked up at her. Do you think I should still be smiling after being turned away 7 times? Her face went pale. I put my headphones on and went back to work. She stood there for a moment, then walked away. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I had just found myself. For a few days after that, nothing dramatic happened. No shouting. No scenes. No desperate messages. Just silence. And somehow, that silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I expected to feel lonely. I expected to feel regret. I expected to feel like I had made a terrible mistake. But what I actually felt was peace. I didn't wake up checking my phone. I didn't replay conversations in my head. I didn't think about what she might be doing or who she might be with. For the first time in years, my mind felt like a quiet room instead of a crowded hallway. At work, things became formal, professional, distant. If she needed something, she emailed. If she had a question, she went through the team lead. If she tried to make small talk, I kept my answers polite and short. Not cold. Not rude. Just neutral. And that neutrality confused her more than anger ever could. One afternoon, I got an email from HR about a mandatory cross-department meeting the next day. I opened the attendee list. Her name was there. I stared at it for a moment. Then I replied that I wouldn't be able to attend. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I went to a clinic instead. Not because I was sick, but because I needed distance. I needed one full day where I didn't have to see her face, hear her voice, or feel that old pull in my chest. The doctor checked my vitals. Everything was normal. He smiled and said I was perfectly healthy. I thanked him and left. When I returned to the office later that day, the meeting was already over. My coworker found me at my desk. She was asking about you, he said quietly. Why weren't you there? I had the day off. She looked upset. I nodded. Marcus stayed with her for a while, he added. That didn't surprise me. That afternoon, she came again. This time, her expression wasn't confused. It was angry. You skipped on purpose, she said. No, I replied calmly. I was unavailable. You're lying. I looked at her gently. You don't get to decide what's true for me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. That was the moment I realized something important. She wasn't upset because she missed me. She was upset because she no longer controlled the narrative. She no longer knew where she stood. She no longer knew how I felt. And for someone who was used to being chased, that uncertainty felt unbearable. Over the next week, her behavior changed. She laughed louder around me. She talked about her weekend plans where I could hear. She mentioned other men casually in conversation. She tried to trigger something. Jealousy, curiosity, reaction. I gave her none. And that silence unsettled her. One morning, she blocked the doorway to the break room as I walked in. "What do you actually want from me?" she demanded. I looked at her. Really looked. Not as the woman I had dreamed about. Not as the future I had imagined. Just as a person standing in front of me. "I don't want anything," I said. She stared like I had taken something away from her. "That's not true," she said. "You always want something." "Not anymore." She didn't move. I stepped around her and poured myself a coffee. She stood there, frozen. I walked out. That night, my phone buzzed. A message. "I miss how we were." I didn't reply. Another one. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Another. "I don't understand what changed." I set the phone down. And for the first time, I didn't feel tempted to pick it back up. The next few days were strange. She started showing up where I was. Not directly. Not obviously. Just nearby. Sitting at tables close to mine. Standing near my group during meetings. Laughing when I laughed, even if she didn't hear the joke. It was subtle. But it was deliberate. One evening, I ran into her outside the building. She was standing near the entrance like she was waiting for someone. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. There was an awkward pause. "I feel like we're strangers," she said. "We always were," I answered honestly. That hurt her more than any insult ever could. She swallowed. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know." "Then why are you acting like I don't exist?" "I'm not," I said gently. "I'm just no longer arranging my life around you." She looked down. That night, she messaged again. "I don't like this distance." I still didn't reply. The next day, she sent a long paragraph. Apologies. Explanations. Confusion. Regret. I read it. I didn't respond. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I had already said everything that mattered. And sometimes, silence isn't avoidance. Sometimes, it's closure. On the fourth day, she showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting her. I opened it. She looked tired. Her eyes were red. Her voice was small. "I don't understand," she said. "Why did you stop trying?" I leaned against the door frame. "I didn't stop trying," I said quietly. "I stopped begging." She blinked. "I didn't know you felt that way." "I did," I replied. "I just didn't think you cared." She took a shaky breath. "I care now." I looked at her. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just with honesty. It shouldn't take my absence for someone to see my value. She nodded slowly. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I made a mistake." "Yes," I said. "You did." We stood there in silence. She waited for me to say more. I didn't. After a moment, she turned and walked away. I closed the door. And I didn't feel like I had lost her. I felt like I had finally found my footing. For years, I had built my sense of worth around someone else's approval. Now, I was building it on my own. And that changed everything. After that night, something shifted, not around me, but inside me. I no longer checked my phone hoping for a message. I no longer wondered what she was thinking. I no longer imagined conversations that would never happen. Instead, I noticed other things. The way the air felt cooler in the mornings. The way coffee tasted better when I wasn't drinking it out of stress. The way silence could feel peaceful instead of lonely. I started arriving earlier to work. Not to avoid her, but because I wanted more time for myself. I used that time to focus. On my work. On my health. On the parts of my life I had neglected while I was busy orbiting someone else. I went back to the gym. Not to look better for anyone, but to feel stronger for myself. I started running again in the evenings. The city looked different when you weren't rushing home to wait for a text. One evening, as I jogged along the river, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I stopped, stared at it, then kept running. Later that night, I read the message. It wasn't long. "I hope you're okay." I replied with one word. "Thank you." Nothing more. Nothing less. That single reply seemed to mean more to her than any of my long emotional messages ever had. She replied instantly. "Can we talk sometime?" I thought about it. Then I answered. "Maybe." That was it. No promise. No date. No reassurance. Just, maybe. The next day, she approached me at work. Not with urgency. Not with frustration. But with something I hadn't seen from her in years. Caution. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She hesitated. "Can we get coffee sometime?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe." She nodded. "I'll take that." Over the next few days, she started behaving differently. Not dramatic. Not intense. Just attentive. She listened when I spoke. She asked questions and waited for the answers. She stopped talking about other men. She stopped trying to impress. It felt less like she was trying to win me back, and more like she was meeting me for the first time. One afternoon, she sat beside me during a break. "I realized something," she said quietly. "What?" "I always thought you'd be there." I nodded. That's usually when people stop paying attention. She swallowed. "I didn't think you'd ever walk away." I didn't think I would either. That honesty hung between us. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't touch my arm. She just sat there. And that restraint told me more than any dramatic gesture ever could. A few days later, we finally did get coffee. Not in the same cafe. Not in the same place where everything had collapsed. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere quiet. We sat across from each other like two people who had never dated. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. She listened. She told me things she had never told me before. About her fears. About her pressure. About her confusion. I listened too. Not as a man hoping for a future, but as a man grounded in the present. When we left, she looked at me. "Do you think we could start over?" I considered it. Honestly. Then I shook my head. "No." Her eyes filled with tears. "But we can start differently," I continued. "Not from where we were. From where we are." She nodded slowly. "I can accept that." And for the first time, I believed her. Over the next few weeks, she became someone else. Not a new person, but a more honest version of the old one. She stopped hiding behind work. Stopped using business as armor. Stopped treating affection like something dangerous. But something inside me had changed too. I no longer needed her. I wanted her, maybe, but I didn't need her. And that difference was everything. One night, she asked me something unexpected. "Why didn't you fight harder for me?" I looked at her gently. "I fought for 7 years." She nodded. "I know. I just stopped fighting someone who wasn't fighting for me." She didn't argue. She couldn't. One evening, as we walked through the city, she said softly, "I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of choosing wrong." I smiled faintly. "And I was afraid of choosing alone." She stopped walking. Turned to me. "I see you now." I met her eyes. "I see myself now." And that was the real ending. Not whether we ended up together. Not whether we stayed apart. But that we finally saw clearly. Sometimes people don't change because they're evil. They change because they finally feel the loss. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not chasing someone into choosing you, but walking away so they have the space to see you, or lose you, and learn. If part 3 was about change, part 4 was about truth. Because real change doesn't reveal itself in words. It reveals itself under pressure. Anyone can sound sincere when things are calm. Anyone can promise growth when nothing is being tested. But when discomfort returns, that's when you find out who someone really is. And that's what happened next. A month passed. Then 2. We talked. Sometimes we met. Sometimes we didn't. There was no rushing. No intensity. No emotional dependency. Just 2 people learning to exist without clinging. And strangely, that balance made everything feel more real than it ever had before. Then something happened that shook that balance. It was small. Almost insignificant. But emotionally, it was huge. She cancelled on me. Last minute. Not because of work. Not because of an emergency. But because she had forgotten she had promised to help a colleague move. She said it casually. Like it didn't matter. Like it was nothing. And suddenly, I felt that old familiar feeling rise in my chest. That quiet disappointment. That sense of being second. That subtle reminder that I was optional. I said nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't express frustration. I simply said, okay. But inside, I was watching. Not her words. Her priorities. 2 days later, she asked if we could meet. She sensed something. Did I upset you? She asked. I took a breath. Do you want the honest answer? Yes. Yes, you did. She blinked. I didn't think it was a big deal. That's exactly why it is, I said gently. She looked confused. You didn't just cancel plans. You showed me how easily I can be replaced. Her face softened. That's not what I meant. I know, I replied. But impact matters more than intent. She went quiet. Then she said something that surprised me. You're right. No defense. No justification. No excuses. Just ownership. I still fall into old patterns, she admitted. But I'm trying. I nodded. That's all I need to hear. That was the first real test. And she passed it. The second test came a week later. Marcus returned. Transferred back to our department. Suddenly he was everywhere again. Laughing loudly. Dropping comments. Making himself visible. I noticed how she reacted. Or rather, how she didn't. She kept distance. Kept boundaries. Kept clarity. She didn't try to hide him. She didn't avoid mentioning him. But she also didn't invite him into our space. One afternoon, he approached me. Smiling like an old joke. Man, looks like you finally won. I looked at him calmly. This isn't a competition. He laughed awkwardly. She overheard. Later, she said to me, I don't want anyone between us anymore. I believed her. The third test was harder. It wasn't external. It was emotional. One night she confessed something painful. She admitted that part of why she never committed was because she liked being wanted. She liked the certainty that someone would always be there. It made her feel safe. Even if she didn't choose them. That honesty hurt. But it also healed. Because now the wound had a name. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't realize how unfair that was. I didn't blame her. I thanked her. For finally seeing it. For finally saying it. And most importantly, for finally stopping it. The fourth test came unexpectedly. She had an opportunity to move to another city for a promotion. A huge one. The kind people wait years for. She told me with excitement. Then stopped. And said, but I won't take it if it means losing what we're building. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear. Not jealousy. Respect. I took her hands. Don't ever shrink your life for me, I said. Choose what's right for you. She looked at me carefully. Are you sure? Yes. She took the job. And we didn't fall apart. We adjusted. We communicated. We stayed present. That was the difference. The fifth test was the hardest of all. Time. Not a dramatic moment. Not a confrontation. Just consistency. Weeks turned into months. And she stayed kind. Stayed honest. Stayed accountable. Not perfectly, but genuinely. And slowly. My nervous system stopped bracing for disappointment. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I stopped guarding my heart like a locked door. Not because I was desperate, but because I felt safe. One evening, as we sat quietly watching the city lights, she said, "You don't chase me anymore." I smiled. "No. Why?" "Because I'm walking beside you now." She leaned her head on my shoulder. And that was enough. Not fireworks. Not obsession. Not fantasy. Just presence. That's what real connection looks like. Not drama. Not pursuit. Not emotional chaos. Just two people choosing each other. Over and over. Not because they're afraid to lose, but because they're free to stay. People often think love is something you find. But the truth is, love is something you build. And what we built after everything broke was very different from what I had imagined in the beginning. It wasn't loud. It wasn't intoxicating. It wasn't overwhelming. It was steady. It was calm. It was safe. Months passed. Not with grand gestures or emotional highs, but with shared mornings, quiet evenings, and honest conversations. We learned each other again. Not as the version that chased. Not as the version that withheld. But as two people who had finally met themselves. She became softer. Not weaker, just more open. She expressed what she felt instead of hiding it. She asked instead of assuming. She admitted fear instead of pretending confidence. And I became stronger. Not colder, just more grounded. I spoke when something hurt. I didn't suppress my needs. I didn't disappear inside myself. We didn't avoid conflict. We learned how to face it without attacking. How to pause instead of explode. How to listen instead of prepare defenses. One night, she said something that stayed with me. "I used to think love was intensity." I smiled. "And now?" "Now I think love is consistency." She was right. Anyone can be intense. But consistency requires character. It requires discipline. It requires emotional maturity. That's why it's rare. One evening, we revisited the cafe. Not the same one, but a similar one. Quiet. Warm. Familiar. We sat across from each other with coffee between us. She looked at me. Not nervously. Not uncertainly. Just clearly. "I know you once asked me something important," she said. I tilted my head. "Yes. I'm not afraid now." I waited. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small box, and slid it across the table. My breath caught. "I'm not proposing," she said with a nervous laugh. "I'm asking if you still want a future with me." I opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band. Nothing flashy. Nothing extravagant. Just honest. I looked at her. Not with the hunger of someone chasing. Not with the fear of someone waiting. But with the calm of someone choosing. "Yes," I said. We didn't kneel. We didn't draw attention. We just smiled at each other. And that was enough. Later that night, as we walked home, she asked, "Why didn't you give up on me completely?" I thought about it. Then answered truthfully, "I didn't give up on you. I gave up on the version of me that needed you to choose me to feel worthy." She squeezed my hand. "And I gave up on the version of me that needed to be chased to feel valuable." We had both grown. Not together, but individually. And that's why we could finally be together. If someone had told me years ago that the most powerful thing I could do for my relationship was to walk away from it, I would have laughed. I would have said that love requires persistence. That it requires effort. That it requires sacrifice. But now I understand something deeper. Love does not require self-abandonment. It does not require shrinking. It does not require waiting to be chosen. It requires self-respect. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to leave situations that keep you small. Because when you stop chasing what hurts you, you make space for what heals you. That's what happened to me. I stopped chasing. And in doing so, I found myself. And when I found myself, I found the version of love that was never possible before. Not because she changed, but because I did. And that changed everything. If you're listening to this and you're waiting for someone to choose you, pause. Ask yourself, have you chosen yourself? Because the moment you do, everything shifts. Not always outwardly, but inwardly. And that's where all real change begins.